Okay, it is only 6:29, but we haven't had anybody try to log in for a couple minutes here. So I'll get my intro out of the way so then you all can start on time with your presentation. But I just wanted to thank everyone for coming first and foremost. I'm Jen. I'm the Adult and Teen Services Librarian here at the Adrian District Library. So of course, if you've got research questions, program recommendations, book recommendations, whatever, anything like that, please of course feel free to stop by, call me, give me an email, whatever, and I'm always happy to listen to those requests. I am so glad that the League of Women Voters of Tecumseh and Lenawee County reached out to me about doing this presentation. We are hoping to do some more with them in the future, also hopefully in person, especially maybe later this summer or in October. So be on the lookout for that. We will be sure to promote it then. As I asked everyone earlier, please do try to keep your microphones and your cameras off throughout the entire presentation. I will be turning mine off momentarily, just so that way everything comes through nice and crisp for our recording of this later on. If you do have any questions, put them in the chat. I will be logged in all evening so I can help monitor the chat for any questions, or if you're having technical issues, anything like that, I will do my best to answer. So I think that's really about all I needed to say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carolyn, Mindy, and Louise.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. I'm Louise Solomon. I'm the chairperson of the League of Women Voters of Tecumseh, Lenawee County. With me tonight is Carolyn Burton, who is a director of voter services for the League of Women Voters of Michigan, as well as our local chapter. And Mindy Dunn, who has been nominated for the co-chairperson position for our new year, which starts in July. This program is being recorded and will be available for viewing in a few days. I'm not sure exactly how many days. You may view the video through the Adrian District Library YouTube channel or by contacting the League at lwvtecumseh@gmail.com and requesting the link to the video. The content of this video is property of our League and not for duplication or editing. The League of Women Voters of Tecumseh, Lenawee County is pleased to present this update on the changing status of voting rights initiatives and legislation in Michigan. It's an educational program with funds provided by the League of Women Voters of Michigan Education Fund. It does not advocate action on the material provided. We encourage people to keep checking their trusted sources of information, including the League of Women Voters of Michigan website and other resources mentioned at the end of this presentation. The purpose of the League of, you can go back one, please, Carolyn, thank you. The purpose of the League of Women Voters of Michigan Education Fund is to provide nonpartisan information about candidates and ballot issues to Michigan voters. It's to provide information about the mechanics of registering and voting, and to encourage citizens to participate in civic life and provide to them nonpartisan information about important non-ballot issues. In 2018, the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, the NAACP, and others supported the Promote the Vote ballot proposal that amended the Michigan Constitution. Voting rights are very popular in Michigan. Promote the Vote, Proposal 3, passed overwhelmingly, 67% to 33% of the voters in 80 of the 83 counties. In addition, the legislature passed and the governor signed Public Acts 350 to 354 of 2018 to provide for online voter registration. As a result, we have some new voting rights we want to highlight tonight. The eligibility to vote is unchanged. You're eligible to vote if you are, on election day, a Michigan resident and a resident of your city or township for at least 30 days. A United States citizen, at least 18 years of age, and not currently serving a sentence in jail or prison. New, is same-day voter registration. In fact, you may register anytime up to 8 p.m. on election day. Registering early offers more choices. So what you can do is in person at your local city or township with proof of residency, or in person at a Secretary of State office, or in person at a state agency providing public assistance and services to people with disabilities. You can also register online at michigan.gov with Michigan driver's license, state ID, or offer the last 4 digits of your social security number. And that's until 2 weeks before election day. You may use a mail-in application, and you need to mail that at least 2 weeks before election day. If you register in person, bring required proof of residency. Any of the following which show your name and address. So certainly a Michigan driver's license or state ID, that works. A current utility bill, a bank statement, a paycheck or government check, other government document, and electronic versions of some of these are fine. Voting rights before election day. All registered voters have a right to vote before election day by absentee ballot. Request an absentee ballot through an application. Your signature is required. Absentee ballots are available 40 days prior to election. Return the absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day. Military and overseas voters can vote absentee also. You can vote in person at your clerk's office or satellite office before election day. Again, it has to be 40 days prior to election, within 40 days prior to election. Check with the clerk for specifics. You can even go to your clerk's office to register to vote, request an absentee ballot, vote it, and return it all in one visit. Not sure if you're registered? Go to www.mi.gov/vote. Voting on election day. You can register to vote at the clerk's office on election day if you're not registered or have moved. If you're registered, you must vote in your assigned precinct. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. ID is required or a signed affidavit. Absentee ballots must be submitted to the clerk or put in the drop box by 8 p.m. Michiganders supported the 2018 Voting Rights Proposal 3 to expand voting rights, and possibly, as a result of Promote the Vote, more people voted in 2020, despite COVID, than in 2016. 5.5 million people voted, more than 652,000 than in 2016. This represents 71% of those 18 or over, compared to 63% in 2016. Please note at the left side of this slide and at a lower level, the 10 cities that were noted for being the ones that had the most increase in voters. You can change that now.
Can you advance it, please?
I can't. Oh, that's strange. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, of those who voted in Michigan's 2020 general election, nearly 2/3, that's 3.3 million, cast absentee ballots. Again, look at the bottom of the slide and you'll see the cities that had the highest increase in absentee votes. Okay, Carolyn, you may go on.
Thank you. Having a little trouble with advancing the slides. Please excuse us. In 2020, we had a close election for president in Michigan, and there has been much controversy. As you can see, we had a closer election in 2016 in Michigan, but we had no drawn-out campaign saying there was voter fraud. Post-election audits of the 2020 general election were the most extensive in Michigan's history. These types of audits were conducted. A precinct procedural audit. These audits were conducted primarily by county clerks and involved the review of more than 200 in-person voting precincts across the state. The audits also included a full hand count of paper ballots cast in the U.S. Senate race in each of these precincts. An absent voter counting board audit. This is new for 2020. The Bureau of Elections worked with city and county election officials to review records and procedures in absent voter counting boards in 4 large jurisdictions. The audits focused on determining how many absent voter counting boards were out of balance, and could they have been reconciled with additional review and identifying the reasons why the counting boards were out of balance. And the third type of audit was a risk limiting audit. The state conducted a risk limiting audit exercise of the presidential election statewide. Approximately 18,000 ballots were randomly selected from more than 1,300 local jurisdictions statewide. And the results of the randomly selected ballots were compared to the statewide tabulated total. The Bureau of Elections also conducted a full hand count audit of all presidential election ballots in Antrim County. The running of elections is a local responsibility held by Michigan's 1,520 city and township clerks, along with their staff, volunteers, and poll workers they hired to work in polling places and that perform other election functions. Auditing of elections, which includes review of city and township clerks who ran the elections, is performed by county and state officials. There were also numerous court cases that found no evidence of voter fraud, and the Senate Oversight Committee chaired by Senator Ed McBroom, a Republican, released a report that said the election was safe and secure. The reaction to the 2020 election has resulted in over 100 bills being introduced into the Michigan House of Representatives and over 100 bills introduced in the Michigan Senate, including the 39-bill package introduced in March. Reaction to the 2020 election has resulted in a quick overview of the legislative process for you here. You go from the Senate Elections Committee to the Senate for a vote with the bill. And then once passed in the Senate, bills go to the House Elections and Ethics Committee. From there, they go from the House Elections and Ethics Committee to the House for a vote. Once passed in the House, they go back to the Senate. The Senate sends to the governor, and the governor has the option to sign or veto a bill. If she vetoes, legislatures can try to override the veto by a 2/3 vote. There are 38 senators currently, with 22 Republicans and 16 Democrats. It takes 24 to override. We have 110 House of Representatives, 55 Republicans, and 51 Democrats with 4 vacancies, 71 to override. The May 3rd special election filled these 4 vacancies. Senate Elections Committee consists of Republican Senators Ruth Johnson, Ed McBroom, and Curtis Vanderwall, and Democratic Senator Paul Wojna. Hearings started on 4/21 of 21 and are continuing. They have taken testimony in all 39 bills. Most bills still stay in committee. As of February, 12 bills have moved. Senate Bills 273, 277 through 280, 285, 302 through 304, 306, 308, and 311. The 12 bills include drop box regulations, mailing of absentee ballot applications, use of volunteers, increased identification in order to register to obtain an absentee ballot, and other issues. Election bills passed the House and the Senate and were vetoed by Governor Whitmer. The governor said that bills perpetuated the big lie and that every citizen has a guaranteed right to vote. 8 election bills have dealt with expansion of polling places, House Bill 4492, block third parties from accessing the qualified voter file, House Bill 4837, ban voting machines from being connected to the internet, House Bill 4838, require county clerks to remove deceased voters from qualified voter file, Senate Bill 277, establish a timeline for completing reviews of initiative petitions, Senate Bill 280, require specific training of poll challengers, House Bill 4528, provide additional provisional ballots if voter does not have specific ID and give 6 days to appear at clerk's office with proper ID for ballot to be counted, Senate Bills 303 and 304. And last, prohibit sending of absentee ballot without an application, require extra identifying information for absent voter application, and no private or in-kind funding for elections, Senate Bill 303. The governors vetoed some of the bills because there was no funding for mandatory training and so forth. This slide references resources for you. You can get a complete copy of the list of bills, current status, and League of Women Voters of Michigan positions on the bills at www.lwvmi.org. You can look up minutes and testimony by going to www.senate.michigan.gov and selecting Senate Elections Committee. Or you can go to www.house.michigan.gov and selecting House Elections and Ethics Committee. You can also look at the bills and see an analysis at www.legislature.michigan.gov. What can you do? You can stay informed. Information is changed regularly at www.lwvmi.org. You can help show people the 2020 election was safe, secure, and fair. Visit the Secretary of State's fact check section at www.michigan.gov. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson has an agenda she would like passed. However, it has not been taken up in the Michigan House or Senate. Recently, some House bills have been introduced that make some of these changes. The complete list is available on the Secretary of State website. Involving equitable access, require absentee ballot applications be mailed to registered voters every federal election cycle, require counting of ballots postmarked by election day or received shortly after, establish early in-person voting at clerk's offices and salary offices prior to election day, make election day a state holiday. For a strong infrastructure, she'd like to allow processing of absentee ballots 2 weeks prior to election day, provide an additional week for the county canvass, Allow recounts of precincts with clerical errors. Consolidate May and August elections into one June election. Provide dependable funding for local election officials. And last, you'd like to secure elections. Prohibit deceptive election practices that deter or mislead voters. Prohibit open carry or firearms within 100 feet of a voting location. Require election challenger and election worker training. And now I'll turn it over to Mindy.
Thank you, Carolyn. There are two petitions that we will be discussing this evening. The first, a citizen-initiated law known as Secure My Vote, and the second, a citizen-initiated constitutional amendment known as Promote the Vote 2022. The first, a citizen-initiated law, will allow citizens to pass a law that can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people. These laws can be changed by the legislature. 340,047 valid signatures on petitions must be submitted by June 1st, 2022, and verified by the Michigan Board of Canvassers. Then the legislature can either enact the law or place it on the next general election ballot. Initiated state statutes require signatures to be 8% of the total vote for governor in the last election. The second petition is a citizens-initiated constitutional amendment. This will allow the citizens of Michigan to amend the Michigan State Constitution. The Constitution can be amended only by a vote of the people. 425,059 valid signatures on petitions must be submitted by July 11th, 2022, and verified by the Michigan Board of Canvassers. Then the people will vote on it at the next general election. Initiated constitutional amendments require signatures to be 10% of the total vote for governor in the last election. We'll begin this discussion with the new citizen-initiated petition, Secure My Vote, which seems to be a response to the 2020 election and the belief by some that there was voter fraud. On September 2nd, 2021, a group called Secure My Vote submitted an initiative petition to the State Board of Canvassers. The board approved the form and the summary, and petitions are being circulated. They must gather 340,047 signatures and have the State Board of Canvassers validate these signatures before it can move on to the legislature. The Secure My Vote ballot question committee had approximately $85,000 when it filed its report on November 2nd, 2021. $80,000 came from one donor, Ron Weiser, chair of the Michigan Republican Party. To see more details, please reference www.michigan.gov, Michigan Campaign Finance Statement. Our next slide will show how the initiative legislation process works. Carolyn, are you able to forward the slides?
We're on slide 18, Mindy.
Ah, okay. Can you back it up? Okay. Can we get to slide 18 now, please?
Mindy, slide 18 is up.
Oh, there it is. Okay, this is the path of an initiative from petition to law. So first you'll see that a proposal is drafted and submitted to the State Board of Canvassers. The State Board of Canvassers will approve the form and summary. The petitions are drawn up and circulated to gather the necessary 340,047 valid signatures. The Board of Canvassers will review and validate those signatures. Then the proposed law will be sent to the legislature, which has 40 days to adopt it as law or place it on the ballot. The law will go into effect and the governor cannot veto it. Citizens of Michigan may initiate legislation as either an indirectly initiated state statute or a directly initiated constitutional amendment. For statutes, if the petition receives enough valid signatures, then the state legislature has 40 days to adopt or reject the proposal. If the legislature rejects the law, then the measure is placed on the next general election ballot. If the legislature approves it, it becomes law 90 days later. The initiated law can be amended by the legislature after adoption through the regular legislative process and must be signed by the governor. If it has an appropriation, there can be no referendum on the law. The Secure My Vote petition has an appropriation, so there can be no referendum. Next slide, please. The Secure My Vote proposal will mandate that people disclose partial Social Security numbers when registering to vote. This is not required now. It restricts options for registered voters to verify their identity when voting at their precinct. Acceptable forms of photo ID would include a driver's license, a state ID card, a passport, military ID, tribal ID, or student ID issued by a university, junior college, or community college. If not, the voter would be given an ID-only provisional ballot. This will eliminate the use of our current affidavit. Secure My Vote proposal requires voters applying for an absentee ballot to include their driver's license or state ID number, as well as the last 4 digits of their Social Security number on their application. Social Security numbers are not required now. It will prohibit election officials from sending or providing absentee applications unless asked. Currently, our clerks can mail applications and have applications available on the website. Next slide. Next slide, please.
You are on slide 20, Mindy.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't see it on my screen. I apologize, everyone who's listening. Secure My Vote proposal will ban charitable contributions, including volunteer time and donated space to help administer elections. Currently, charitable contributions and volunteers are allowed. It states that drop boxes close at 8 p.m. on election day. That is our current law. It will mandate clerk offices to be open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the 5 weekdays leading up to the election to accept ballots, or that drop boxes be made available for return ballots. This is a new requirement. And Secure My Vote will establish Voter Access Fund and allocate $3 million for 1 year to provide a free photo identification for those voters who declare need. This would be a new appropriation, and this will allow the legislature to adopt the legislation without a vote of the people and block a people's referendum vote after adoption. Just by placing $3 million appropriation in the initiative, no referendum would be allowed. Some additional facts I'd like to share with you. The Secure My Vote initiative states that if a voter does not present a photo ID at the precinct, the voter would complete a provisional ballot and will be required to go to their clerk's office within 6 days to verify their identity in order for their vote to count. Currently, Michigan voters can sign an affidavit at the precinct affirming their identity, and if their names are on the qualified voter file, they can vote. 11,400 or 0.2% of voters use this option in 2020. Please note that there are penalties for perjury, punishable by a fine up to $1,000 and/or jail up to 5 years for providing false information on an affidavit. 465 cities, townships, and counties received funding from nonprofits in 2020 to help administer their elections. Voters cannot vote to repeal this law because it contains an allocation for 1 year of $3 million to provide voter IDs for those who declare hardships. The current cost of a standard state ID is $10, and we have current provisions in place for hardship cases. Now we'll discuss the citizen-initiated constitutional petition, Promote the Vote 2022. On January 31st of this year, Promote the Vote 2022 submitted a constitutional amendment for approval prior to beginning to collect signatures. The Michigan State Board of Canvassers approved the summary of the content of the petition on February 11th. Petitions are now being circulated for signature collection. Our next slide shows how the constitutional amendment process works. Once again, a proposal is drafted and submitted to the State Board of Canvassers. The State Board of Canvassers approves the form and summary. Petitions are drawn up and circulated to collect the necessary 425,059 signatures. The State Board of Canvassers then must validate those signatures. If that threshold is met, it will go on to the next general election ballot, and if passed by the voters, it would amend our state constitution. Promote the Vote 2022 constitutional amendment proposal will ensure that voters can vote free from harassment, intimidation, and interference. This is not in our Constitution or law now. It will allow the ballots of military and overseas voters to be counted if they are postmarked by Election Day and received within 6 days of the election. This is not our Constitution or law now. It will provide access to state funding for postage on absentee applications and ballots, funding for security for drop boxes, and funding for absentee ballot tracking that will alert voters if there is an issue with their ballot and how to fix it. This is not in our Constitution or law now. It will allow voters to request an absentee ballot to be mailed to them for all future elections without having to apply each time. This is not in our Constitution or law now. Promote the Vote 2022 will allow voters to prove their identity when voting in person by showing a photo ID or signing a legal document, an affidavit. When voting by mail, voters must provide their signature, which is then verified by the election officials. This is not in our Constitution, but it is in law now. Promote the Vote 2022 will require election audits be conducted in public by state and county election officials based on methods established prior to each election. It also makes clear that the legislature or political parties play no role in the vote certification, and that boards of county canvassers have a clear and ministerial duty to certify election returns received by municipal clerks. This is not in our Constitution, although some parts are current law now. It will provide a minimum of 9 days of early voting for 8 hours per day before statewide elections. This is not in our Constitution or law now. And Promote the Vote 2022 preserves the authority of local government to accept publicly disclosed charitable donations and in-kind donations to assure elections are secure and accessible. This is not in our Constitution or law now. Louise, take it from here.
Thank you. Here is a map of the United States showing 19 states highlighted that have changed voting in 2021. These states have passed 34 bills that changed voting in 2021. There are bills moving at the federal level that may impact the laws passed in those 19 states. The U.S. House of Representatives passed H.R. 1 for the People Act, expanding voting rights, ending gerrymandering, and limiting campaign finance. The U.S. House of Representatives passed H.R. 4, which was the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to restore the Voting Rights Act that was originally signed in 1965. The U.S. Senate has not passed similar bills. Or the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, or the Freedom to Vote Act. On January 21st of this year, the U.S. Senate failed to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, but it did get into the Senate, but it was not passed. So what can you do? We're back to just repeating ourselves and saying, just keeping yourself aware. So there's a publication, it's called Knowing Your Voting Rights. It's easily accessible. It has a very long link here for you to see, and you'll see that at the end of the presentation, and you'll have time to make a copy of it then if you choose to do so. We also suggest that people we should educate people that the 2020 election was safe, secure, and fair. And you can go to the Secretary of State's office under fact checks, just like Carolyn said, at www.michigan.gov, and look at that on your own. You need to stay informed about the status of legislation and see action alerts. We think that the League of Women Voters site is a good site to have people go to. So it's www.lwv.org. Now we're going to talk about what is misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is the sharing of false information without intent of harm. So misinformation can spread when journalists misinterpret something or fail to verify a source's claims. It can also happen on social media. Well-intentioned individuals can easily share or like content that is outdated or misleading and do so unintentionally. Disinformation is creating and sharing false information with the intent to do harm. Bad actors who spread disinformation online have different motivations. Could be voter suppression in communities of color, spreading mistrust in democracy, but the common goal is to have their bad information reach the mainstream media. So how do you spot disinformation? Well, there's some things that you can check. Look at the source. Does a URL look strange? Check the About page on the website. Check the date. Is the story old news? Sharing out-of-date information may not match current events. Cross-check it information? Are reputable news services reporting the same story? Read past the headline. What's the whole story? Sometimes the headline doesn't match the content. Emotionally charged content. Disinformation intends to sow division by getting us angry or sad through images or memes. And how do we combat mis and disinformation? Never quote the bad information. This only helps to spread the bad messages wider, and studies show that repeating bad information, even to debunk it, makes people more likely to remember the bad information and not good information. Refer to the bad information without repeating it. For an example, I could say, and it would work, some bad actors are making false claims about the legitimacy of the 2020 election, as opposed to my saying, well, Representative XYZ says that thousands of ballots were stuffed at the election office. This isn't true. Focus on providing correct information, and if possible, include trustworthy sources for where to learn more. It cannot be said enough. Do not repeat or quote bad information. The method of showing myth versus fact only spreads the myth further. Find ways to call out the bad information without repeating it. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Okay, here's the list of the resources that we've been using. And then we thought maybe you could either write them down or just take a picture while we're moving on. And did we have any questions in the chat room?
We do not have any questions in the chat yet. I don't know if people are just waiting until we were finished or what might have been happening there.
Okay.
But as everyone is writing and typing and all of that kind of thing, I will also throw out there that if you are looking at an article and you can't decide if it's misinformation or disinformation, places like your local library do love to help with that kind of research. We did get trained in how to help you with that. We are always happy to help try and either debunk or reinforce why something is good, why something is misinformation, all of that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. You also have good posters in your library with good
Yes.
information. Yes, very good. If there aren't any other questions, we're just happy that you came tonight. And we'd like to remind you to use the resources that we gave you, and to also please use the League of Women Voters Michigan webpage and Facebook for up-to-date information. That's easily used. So I think we're finished. And I will say thank you again for coming. And Jennifer, thank you.
Yes, I will try to say thank you as well. Maybe if I just leave my video off, I'll be a little more audible. But yes,
Okay.
Thank you to everyone for coming. I will make sure everyone knows when the video gets up. I'll see if Andy can do anything about some of the sound issues we just had a moment ago.
Okay.
But hopefully this should be a pretty good video once we've got it all set. Again, thank you all so much for coming this evening. I feel like I learned a lot personally.
Okay, bye-bye.